everyone. I can't express enough my gratitude for your time and attention to come to our Master Feeds Blueprint Beef Virtual Academy. We're really excited to have you and to talk about what is Blueprint and unlocking your genetic potential. Two very easy statements to read out, but something that we truly feel affects your production, bottom line, and opportunities down the road. Programming is more than just mineral. It provides solutions to issues that we face and a boost that we build upon as we achieve each individual goal. My name's Curtis Reed. I'm a Master Feeds account sales specialist. My wife and I, along with my parents, we live north of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and we raise purebred Herefords. We are the oldest Hereford breeding family in Canadian history, and we are also dabbling into maintainer and club calf genetics. So it's not necessarily that I'm sitting in front of you preaching. I'm also practicing what we're talking about here as a 100% full blueprint herd. It's really easy to have a slide that comes up. We can all read what is blueprint. But for us, blueprint takes us so much further in the fact of on-farm issues to on-farm solutions, to bringing in a multitude of different ideas that we feel are important, because let's face it, the issues of today and the opportunities that we see going forward, they haven't changed a whole bunch over the years. Technology, advancement, and adaptation. Well, to me, technology passed agriculture, especially livestock production type agriculture, a long time ago. And now that we're more willing to have it come back, I feel it's going to help us succeed and be profitable more easily into the future. Reducing calving issues. If this isn't number one and or two or really high on your list, please call me and fill me in on your secrets, because we all have calving issues. Going 100% is truly the benchmark, but unfortunately, it's just we have different steps and issues we all face depending where we live. Cow pregnancy rates in the fall. Every single old-time rancher will tell you open cows don't make you money. Well, we're going to be fortunate that later today, we're going to put some dollar numbers to that, because it's not truth unless we can put a little bit of proof to it. And why do you put so much sweat equity into what you do? Calving time. Again, minimize issues, maximizing those goals. So when we look at the different graph, bringing it all together, there's these three key ideas that I have. Tightening the window in breeding. And we're also going to talk a little bit about economic numbers later with Eric on how we're bringing in cows into earlier calving, tighter calving windows. And we can't forget about the bull. And then livestock production needs to catch up on that technology advancement. The onus necessarily isn't on you as the grassroots producer, the cow-calf operator out there working hard. We want to be that conduit between to bring you those technology advancements, and this is part of it. So when you say technology advancements, we aren't talking about magic or foo-foo dust. This is ideas, technologies used and based in science. We are investing as an alt-tech company utilizing nutrigenomics, and it's an easy tie to why we call this program Blueprint. Why not express the true genetic potential of all of our animals? The genetics have changed. We will always appreciate what our grandparents did and our great-grandparents and those that started our programs. As a fifth-generation Hereford breeder and a ninth-generation in Canadian agriculture, I can't thank my family tree enough for setting that foundation of what I do. Now I have the understanding that we've selected bulls, females, we're trying to do better every year. But if we're not looking at all the different pieces of our management structure, we will not be able to express that genetic potential. Traditionally, we've always said feeding minerals is to prevent deficiency symptoms. Today, in that new progressive mindset, we're providing all of the tools for optimum production and health. Why is that important? Today, as margins are tighter than they have ever been, we see grain prices go up right now, and we're seeing calf prices come down. How are we making these girls in the middle of this slide optimal peak everything? We're talking about combining a nutrition program, our herd health, our management systems. Are we doing extended grazing? There's so many things that come into it with business planning. But when we think specifically about minerals, let's take copper, for example. Look at how many different CUs we see all around this graph. That's a lot of demand for this cow to be on max productivity, and that's why we feel it's important. And then we bring you some options that are more bioavailable and really bang for your buck. If we know what we're putting in the cow, we can then know why it's using it. And that's where we come along with a product called Bioplex. Bioplex is a core to what Blueprint is. At a metal-protein-8 chelate, Bioplexes use multiple peptides. You can see di, tri. So as we do that, we're having multiple amino acid sources tied to our inorganic source to then mask it like what? If you answered a plant, I wish I could reach through and give you a high five, but it's like a plant. If Mother Nature has it so right, why are we not trying to follow along that path? And this is really the scientific section of why. But when we're feeding these products, then we just can't ask we can't ask C20 cow to go out and eat a certain patch of grass that's all copper, or this piece of grass is going to be high copper. We need to be able to supplement to get her into those right places, and maximizing bioavailability is how we will do that within utilizing Blueprint Beef Mineral. Bioplex offers, again, the bioavailability for easy absorption, readily metabolized within the body, aka it's highly available, and we are, again, optimizing performance. We should have put up a bingo chart at the start that's like, how many times is Curtis going to say performance, optimization, bioavailability? Those are terms that keep coming up, not necessarily because we're trying to talk well above everybody else's heads. Those type of terms have a direct effect on your pocketbook. This isn't frilly, this is real life info. And when we talk about hitting your pocketbook, and we've talked about bringing cows into closer calving intervals, when we have closer calving intervals, we have more uniform calf groups. We have cows that are cycling earlier. All in all, we really build up to maximizing not only estrus, but also herd health. And then in the end, when we have a more uniform calf group, that could be potential profit in your pocket. So that's a lot busy with some numbers to it. But when we think, if my cows come into heat earlier, they have more cycles before their exposure. That means they can get bred earlier on their first service, and then we have an increase of percent conception on first service. Now, if you have 40 cows in a say 400 cows in a 5x5 barn, this type of information might not be the best for you. But if you have 400 cows and you don't want to calve outside of your 60-day window, this is something to really pay attention to. Our last one for those on the call, and this is something that I find extremely interesting because we do superovulate cows on our farm and offer frozen genetics out in the marketplace. So when you have a higher fertilization percentage, which means you have higher number of true frozen embryos, that is straight profit in terms of a revenue basis. Our next product that we talk about and being a core of what we do in Blueprint is Cellplex. Cellplex is the most proven form of selenium yeast. When we talk about bioavailability, when we are living in Western Canada, where we are usually living in a selenium deficient zone, this has such a major effect, and I feel that it's something that as an industry we've overlooked over the years. Selenium truly has a big time opportunity to help increase fertility, performance, and help minimize issues we're seeing on farm. If I put it to you that feeding Blueprint mineral containing Cellplex to your cows prior to calving, your cows would then pass more selenium through their milk from mama to calf. Would that potentially give you the opportunity to stop needling your cows with selenium? Does that offer you a advantage in terms of time, frustration, and not having to talk down a cow out in the middle of a big old field and say, don't worry, dear, I'm not here to harm your calf. I just want to give it a needle. And is she going to agree with you or not? You know, that's the type of research that we bring here because it has a direct effect on what we do every day. And if we're only feeding this mineral 60 days prior to calving, we can see that there is quite a large jump in the amount, over double the amount of selenium passed from cow to calf. And again, just because we can say it, the true unsung hero of that breeding season could be the bull. The easiest one to forget about are the bulls. They come into pens, they rub on stuff, they fight, they wreck things. We want to keep them away. We don't want to look at them. We don't have to worry about them until it comes time to, well, semen check. So if we're not offering that optimum program to these bulls, how can we expect that they're doing their best to be ready for that breeding season, for that breed soundness evaluation? The bull is the fastest path of genetic advancement. When you buy a bull, you have the opportunity of, let's say, 10 to 50 calves of genetic advancement. A cow is only one unit of genetic advancement every year, unless you super ovulate her, but you know, how many cows will you truly get out of that? And is it as relevant in terms of the overall commercial industry? Probably not. The bull is truly the fastest path. If we're out buying bulls, investing in those genetics, why are we not striving to keep those genetics in our herd? You can talk with a bunch of old men at a coffee shop and they're like, I remember that one bull that I had 30 years and he bred for 2 or 3 years and I still have those cows in the herd and they're the best cows I ever had. So why are we not trying to keep those type of bulls in our herd for 10 years? Good bulls are not cheap, and cheap programming does not make good bulls. That is not a quote from me. That is a small little excerpt of a time I was sitting across from a fella that sells quite a few purebred bulls. And that was an excerpt I took out of that conversation with him. And I've been very fortunate to work with him for going on 7 years, utilizing this program. When we talk about utilizing, again, that Cellplex, again, a busy slide. We talk about research slides. They get pretty busy. Let's focus into the right-hand column. That's where the differences are. And let's just get back down all the way down here to the 2 in the bottom right corner. Defective sperm percent from an inorganic source of selenium to the selenium-enriched yeast, we are seeing a 40% reduction in defective sperm. If you sell bulls, yearlings, 2-year-olds, whatever you're doing, if you have bulls and you're doing breed soundness evaluations on them, whether it's one all the way up to a couple hundred herd bulls, say, if you have 40% less defective sperm in a day on semen check day, how many more bulls are you, number one, going to be able to sell, put through your bull sale, or number 2, retain for the genetic investment that you have already put into them? Or just think about that for a second. This one kind of brings in 2 of the aspects we've talked about with Bioplex and Cellplex. So when we look at bulls that are drawn for semen, and again, something that I have a little bit of experience with in terms of drawing semen and marketing some semen off of bulls that we've owned or in partnership opportunities we've purchased into. As you produce more units of semen, freezable semen, your cost per unit can come down slightly, or just the overall cost of that jump. But again, when we're talking about collecting a bull or even him servicing a cow, we are producing more optimal units collected. So we've talked about two different things, Bioplex and Cellplex. So how does that fit in terms of when we talk about Blueprint being more than just a mineral program? How do we make that interaction of becoming more than a mineral program? How does it become part of day-to-day management? When we look at our year-round goals and gains, there's other things that have a major effect. And that's where we can utilize, again, that scientific advancement to help us. When we have these technology advancements, we're bringing them into that Blueprint programming so that we can optimize what we're doing within each cow herd. Mycotoxin management, gut health management, mineral management, feed efficiency. As we put these different ideas together, they'll have a synergistic effect. Remember when we went back to the nutrigenomic slide, that is still a part of these different management systems and how we bring them together to maximize gut health and immune support in cows. A cow is just like you and I. When our guts don't feel good, we are not all that productive. When your back hurts, you're probably not all that productive, just the same as your belly. So with our cows, when we want our cows to work for us, cows are supposed to work for me. That's why I bought them. That's why we have grass. That's this and that and everything. Yes, they do. But like a good employee, they do their job to the best of their ability when we supply the proper tools. That is what we want to do in working with you with Master Feeds Blueprint Mineral, utilizing Alltech technologies. So as we go back to review the technology advancement and adaptation, so what we've done with Blueprint Mineral in solving that issue is bringing together industry-leading technologies supplied by Alltech, and we're putting those together in a package that will help to maximize the genetic potential of what you're doing within your herd. Reduce calving issues. We're seeing that by utilizing Blueprint technology, those Alltech technologies within Blueprint, that we are maximizing retention and absorption of key trace minerals and vitamins in a synergistic fashion. We are not causing excess tie-up and bypass through these cows. What we're putting in is going to work for us. Calving or cow pregnancy rates in the fall. That really just speaks for itself, and I'm really looking forward to listening to Eric, I'm really looking forward to listening to Dr. Kathy and Eric expand more on cow pregnancy rates and the overall economics of what we're doing in terms of cattle. Maximizing performance and return. Well, this is something that I think as Dr. Matt gets into it will be really intriguing and support that comments on Bioplexes, the bioavailability of being a proteinate polysaccharide, and what we're able to achieve in the fact that when it's available, animals are going to use it. Maximize your genetic performance. Don't let your extra time and effort go without the influence of these technologies to help you achieve those goals that much faster and to build upon to your next goals. Again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving us your time. We know that everyone's busy, things have to be done around the farm, and we sure appreciate you taking this opportunity to visit with us about Blueprint programming with our Blueprint Virtual Beef Academy. Again, thank you very much and have a good day.
I'm Dr. Matt Hersom, Professor and Director for the Piedmont Research and Education Center at Clemson University. Prior to my position that I have now, I spent 16 years as a beef cattle extension specialist with the University of Florida, where I had a research and extension appointment and did a fair amount of research, primarily in the area of beef cattle nutrition. And so that's why I'm talking to you today about mineral supplementation and does it really matter? Prior to getting into that concept, though, let's talk about some myths in general, and specifically some mineral myths that I've run into in my career when I talk to beef cattle producers. One of the first myths I run across when we talk about minerals in cattle is that some producers believe that their cows know exactly what minerals they need. Now, I have a PhD in animal nutrition, and that relates to human nutrition. I have no idea on a daily basis how much calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, or copper I need. And certainly I've got the ability to read. Our cows lack the ability to read, and so they don't know how much minerals they actually need. Another myth about minerals is that cows don't need minerals all the time, that they can go without them. Well, as you'll see here in another couple of slides, we're going to talk about how important minerals are on a daily basis and what they are involved in. And so we need minerals in our diet all the time. That's why they're considered an essential nutrient. Another myth is that cows will consume just the right amount of a trace mineral supplement. Again, cows can't read. They can't read the feed tag to know that they should eat 2 ounces, 4 ounces, or 6 ounces of that trace mineral. So they're going to consume to a level based on a number of different characteristics of that mineral that we're offering them. Another myth is that mineral form doesn't matter. Well, I'm here to tell you that bioavailability is incredibly important. And so form of the minerals that we're providing our cows in their trace mineral supplement is incredibly important. Another myth is that grass provides everything. Well, that's just not true, because we all know that, because if grass provided everything, we'd never have to supplement a cow. And so we know better than grass provides everything, particularly in the case of trace minerals. Another myth is that cows have to have white salt next to that trace mineral supplement. They don't need to have an additional source of supplement. A lot of our trace minerals already come with salt, and so providing them more salt just provides competition for that trace minerals supplementation. And so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end too. But that's just a good way of trying to dilute out your trace mineral supplement consumption and save some money, which ultimately is not a good thing in the long run. And then finally, that mineral supplementation fixes everything. While trace mineral supplementation is important, it is not a silver bullet. It will not fix poor management or poor nutritional provisions or poor nutritional resources that the cows don't have access to. So let's talk about, are minerals even important? Well, of course they are. Minerals are important for all facets of production. Whether it's just maintenance of that cow walking around the pasture and being a cow, whether that's growth of that animal, whether it's a growing steer in the feedlot, a replacement heifer, or even that 2-year-old cow who's still growing, minerals are important for growth. Lactation. Our cows at some point are all going to lactate if they are a productive cow, and minerals are incredibly important for the production of milk and all the biological processes that go along with that. Reproduction. Reproduction is incredibly important for the beef cattle operation. An enterprise, and reproduction underpins that, and appropriate mineral nutrition is incredibly important for adequate and healthy reproduction in our cow herd. And then finally, health. A healthy cow herd, a healthy calf crop, healthy calves going into the feedlot are all the goal and a necessity in the beef cattle industry. And certainly trace mineral supplementation is an incredibly important part of the component of overall animal health for our beef cattle industry. So I posit this question to you is, when is a cow or calf not in any one of those scenarios, maintenance, growth, lactation, reproduction, or health? The only time they're not in one of those scenarios is when they're dead. And so on a daily basis, our cows need trace mineral supplementation or access to trace minerals. So I would ask you, what day is it okay to shorten an animal's nutritional requirements? What day is it okay that that cow doesn't get adequate selenium? What day is it okay that that calf does not get an adequate level of copper in its diet to perform all the metabolic functions that it has. If you tell me the day that it's okay for that animal to be short on its nutrients, I'll tell you the metabolic process and physiological process that we are impeding on that given day. So let's talk about how trace minerals influence the cow-calf production cycle. So we're going to start with maternal trace mineral supplementation, getting an adequate level, an appropriate level of trace minerals into that beef cow. So providing her that supplement then influences her maternal trace mineral status, and that's something that we can measure and we can assess. And so that's a perfect starting point when we're talking about that cow-calf production cycle. That maternal trace mineral status then will influence reproduction and pregnancy establishment. And again, from a cow-calf and cow herd standpoint, that is one of the most important things that we get done on an annual basis, is getting that cow pregnant. Then once we get her pregnant, placental growth and development occurs. Trace minerals are incredibly important in that process, and so need to be an adequate supply. We get in utero trace mineral transfer and ultimately fetal development. Again, intensely biologically relevant and intensive, and so we need an adequate supply of trace minerals. We then get to postnatal calf nutrition, things like the generation and production of colostrum, good quality colostrum, generation and production of milk. Again, trace minerals are important for that. Mom's or the cow's trace minerals status is important in determining the quality of that. And then finally, we get growth, immunity, performance, and sexual development of those offspring, whether that's bulls, whether that's replacement heifers, whether that's steers going into the feedlot. Mom's trace mineral status all has had an influence on the success of those calves as they move on to the next steps of their productive life. So I'm putting some numbers up here, but let me backtrack for just a minute, because we wanted to look at how important was trace mineral supplementation in a commercial setting. So like I said, I did research at the University of Florida, and we went out onto some commercial ranches, 2 commercial ranches in fact, and looked at the influence of either utilizing inorganic or organic trace mineral supplements for the cow herd. And we looked at this over 2 years on one farm or one ranch, and the first year in ranch B, or that B1. And so you can look at those numbers, but all told, we had just short of 1,000 cows on each treatment, whether that was inorganic trace mineral supplements coming from sulfates or organic trace minerals. That was a complete replacement of all the inorganic trace minerals with organic trace mineral supplementation. And so you can see highlighted in orange that total for the 2 ranches over those 2 years. We had an increase, a significant increase in the percent pregnant cows that received the organic trace mineral supplementation compared to the inorganic supplementation. And so you can see we were already starting with very high levels of pregnancy, running in the low to mid 90s, just replacing the inorganic trace minerals with organic trace minerals. We saw a significant increase in the percent pregnant in that cow herd, or in that experiment. We followed that up, obviously, getting cows pregnant is important, but that the offspring of those calves are equally important. So we looked at weaning weights of the calves coming off of the ranches in 2 years. And so here you can see we've got it broken out by inorganic and organic steers and heifers. And you can see we did have a significant increase in calf weaning weight coming from cows that were offered the organic trace mineral supplement. And you can see it's quite significant in the heifer group, but equally important in the steer group. It was an increase of just about 25 pounds of weaning weight when we offered the cows organic trace minerals compared to inorganic trace minerals. So what did we learn from that on-ranch study, really where the rubber hits the road there? The trace minerals do seem to be permissive to positive performance. We can get a performance bump just by replacing inorganic trace minerals with organic trace minerals. And certainly cows that are in better body condition score, and cows that are older seem to respond better in that on-farm trial. One of the questions we had as a result of doing that experiment, and oftentimes producers would have, is does supplementation need to occur on a year-round basis, or do we need to do it just prior to calving or post-calving? What is more important? And I would say, based on that data, if we're looking at just calf weaning weight, we're not necessarily sure when it is the most important, because we started that supplementation program approximately 90 days prior to calving, and then continued it on through weaning. So we can't quite grasp there what was the most important time period. Obviously, though, we can tell that that time period that we chose did have a positive impact. And same thing for pregnancy. We can't quite tease out when was the most important time to supplement those animals or change that trace mineral supplement. But again, we know that time period that we chose did have a positive influence on pregnancy rate in those cows. So we followed up that commercial work, that on-farm work, with some more intensive on-campus work. Coming up to our cow herds at the University of Florida and utilized them to do some more intensive work, where we investigated the source of trace minerals over 2 production cycles. We looked at cow trace mineral status, performance, and reproduction. We also examined the effect of pre- and postnatal cow trace mineral source on neonatal and calf trace mineral status, their performance, and some measures of immunity. We looked at calf trace mineral status, performance, and acute phase response to the weaning stress. And then finally, we looked at the effect of pre- and postnatal trace mineral source on heifer sexual development and bull sexual development. And I'll touch on all of these, some results from these here in just a second. So here I've got 4 different slides, and so I'm going to start in the upper left. And what it shows is the effect of mineral source on colostrum immunoglobulin M. So how much of that immunoglobulin was showing up in the dam's colostrum as a result of the trace mineral source they were getting. And again, the inorganic source was just sulfate sources, whereas the organic source was trading out those inorganic sources for organic sources, fairly similar to the blueprint product. And so when we look at colostrum IgM, we see a tendency for an increase in IgM in colostrum from cows that were offered that organic trace mineral source. So we're pushing more immunoglobulins into the colostrum in those cows that got organic trace minerals. Moving across the top, we see the effect of mineral source and breed on calf IgA 12 hours after calving. Again, we look at the blue and orange bars, and you can see we have a significant increase in IgA in the calf serum 12 hours after calving. So that calf got more immunoglobulins out of the colostrum and into their body. That's going to improve that calf health, calf's outcome. We move to the bottom left, looking at the effect of trace mineral source on calf total immunoglobulins 24 hours after calving. Again, we see a nice trend for an increase in total Ig immunoglobulins in those calves whose dams receive organic trace minerals. And then the bottom right, we followed that all the way out to 30 days after calving, where we looked at immunoglobulin G. And again, we see in those calves a significantly higher level of immunoglobulin G if they came from dams who were supplemented with organic trace minerals starting about 90 days prior to calving. So by providing mom an organic source of trace minerals, we were able to increase the immunoglobulin concentration in the offspring of those cows. Now, one of the things we did, we started that organic supplementation 90 days prior to calving and fed it all the way through weaning. And then we took liver biopsies of those cows at some defined periods. At the start of supplementation, prior to calving, at the beginning of the breeding season, and when we weaned those calves. Now you can see our trace mineral concentrations there. And what I put this slide up to show you is that we had a time of that for any given trace mineral that we were looking at. meaning that even though we were pushing trace minerals into these cows through a very intensive supplementation program, trace minerals, liver concentrations of those trace minerals changed throughout that cow's productive season. So the take-home message here is, if you're assessing cow trace mineral status by a liver biopsies, and that's a great way to do it, make sure you consistently do it at the same time of year. So you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. Because if you do it at two different times of the year or two different phases of the production cycle, and then try and compare those numbers year over year, you might be getting some misleading assessments of the cow's mineral status. So what are some of the implications from that cow-calf section of our research? We do have the potential for enhanced calf immune status. We see that through increased concentrations of immunoglobulins both in the colostrum and in the calf serum. We see variation in trace mineral status among animals, even though we were supplementing them fairly intensively. That production cycle variation in that cow and our cow herd in general does complicate trace mineral status assessment. So we need to make sure that we're doing it consistently, so then we can compare to see if interventions do result in a positive change. But I think there's some opportunities to specify or do some specificity of trace mineral supplementation. Certainly when we start that prior to calving, we can see that those trace minerals are positively affecting colostrum production, colostrum quality, and the health status of those calves when they're early on in that calf's life. So our next question was, does dam mineral supplementation affect the calf? And we're going to look at heifer and bull development out of those cows. So in year one of our calf trial, when we were supplementing mom, we started 90 days prior to calving and then continued that supplementation all the way through the weaning period. You can see we did have a significant effect that calves that were giving organic trace minerals gained more body weight after birth, prior to weaning, and had greater adjusted 205-day body weights compared to calves that came from dams that had only gotten inorganic sources of trace mineral. So we were able to improve overall calf performance just through a trace mineral supplementation in the first year of our study. Now we wanted to look at the effect on puberty, and this is in heifers. This is in the first year. So again, think about this. We started supplementing these cows 90 days prior to calving, and then the cows stayed on that supplement through weaning, and then we moved heifers into a development program, and they stayed on the trace mineral that they were born into. So if mom got organic trace minerals, the heifer got organic trace minerals, and vice versa. So in year one, we didn't see any effect of trace mineral source on the age to puberty in our heifers, averaging in the ballpark of about 430 days before they hit puberty in Angus and Brangus calves. The interesting thing, though, is in year two. And in year two, mom stayed on that organic trace mineral from 90 days prior to calving in year one, and we rolled her right into that second year. She stayed on that trace mineral. So heifers that were born in year two came from mom who had been on that trace mineral at her conception and all the way through her fetal development. And so in this graph, you can see organic animals, organic heifers are denoted in orange. They were reaching puberty earlier than heifers that came from dams that had received the inorganic trace mineral. So we were pushing that age to puberty back 20 to 30 days in some instances. And that's important, because the sooner we get that heifer pubertal, the more likely we are to get her bred and pregnant. And the sooner we can do that, the more productive she's going to be for the rest of her life. So that's why that's important, and very interesting the fact that we see that just through a replacement of organic trace minerals. Now we did look at some bull aspects, and I will tell you there are some limitations to our bull data. We have small numbers. At universities, it's harder to do bull trials. We don't have a large number of bulls, and our cow herd isn't set up for generating bulls. But we did have 15 bulls that we put through this, and this graph shows the effect of a trace mineral source and breed on both age and sexual maturity. How soon do they become mature? And you can see on the far left there, bulls that came from dams that received organic trace minerals reached sexual maturity about 40 days earlier than bulls that came from dams that received the inorganic trace mineral. And so, obviously, if you're developing bulls, the sooner you can get them to reach sexual maturity, the sooner they can enter into the breeding program. And we also did see some decrease in secondary abnormalities in sperm in bulls that received the organic trace mineral compared to the inorganic trace mineral. So we saw a decrease in sperm abnormalities when those bulls came from dams and received organic trace minerals during their development program. So let's just talk briefly, though. I'm a nutritionist, so we're going to sum this up. Talking about the effect of mineral deficiencies. And so here we've got a very classic graph that if that animal is in a normal or adequate level of trace mineral status, everything is good and we don't have any problems. As they move from normal to marginal status, the first thing we lose is immunity. We start seeing deficiencies or a decrease in the overall immune status of those animals. That's a very sneaky thing. We don't always notice that, but we get a couple more calves that are sick or they don't perform well. And more importantly, when they go on to that next step during the beef cattle cycle, they see decreased performance because they're getting sick. The next thing the cow herd loses is fertility. And maybe not as a huge shift, but we start to lose 1 or 2 cows that aren't getting pregnant in our cow herd. And now all of a sudden, we don't have the opportunity to have those 2 or 3 calves that are going on, either producing heifers or becoming steers that we're selling. The next thing we see falling out when those animals start to become marginal in trace mineral status is growth. Now that one really starts to affect our pocketbooks. Not only do we not get as many calves on the ground through decrease in fertility, some of those calves are getting sick. Now they're not growing as well because they don't have adequate trace mineral status. And the last thing we see is clinical signs. And by the time we get to clinical signs of trace mineral deficiencies, man, the train has left the station and we are in trouble. And we needed to intervene long before we start seeing clinical signs of trace mineral deficiencies in our cow herd. The final thing I'm going to talk about is mineral delivery options. And I term mineral delivery options the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are good ways to do it, there are some bad ways to do it, and there are some really ugly ways to do it. And those ugly ways to do it are on the far right of the slide. They are trace mineralized salt blocks. Trace mineralized salt blocks are good at one thing and one thing only. They are good at delivering salt. They run 99 to 97% salt, so there is no way on God's green earth that a cow is going to get enough trace mineral by licking on that salt block. It's just physically impossible. There's not enough trace mineral in that block for that cow to get an adequate supply of trace mineral. Next thing you'll see as we move to the left is what I call cafeteria style, and that would be the bad. And cafeteria style trace mineral supplementation is the concept, goes back to that myth that a cow knows exactly what she needs and how much she needs. So what we see is producers will buy every trace mineral source available, put it each in its own little box, and leave it up to the cow to consume what she wants. And she consumes what she wants based on taste and flavor, not on the idea that she understands that she needs so much copper, so much selenium, so much cobalt, so much manganese, calcium, phosphorus, things like that. She's going to consume what tastes good and what tastes good only. So then we move finally to the far left, and we got different ways, and they're either good ways to deliver trace mineral. Whether that's a loose trace mineral in an adequately enclosed and protected feed bump, whether that's putting it into a pellet that we're feeding those animals, whether that's a liquid product, or whether that's a manufactured block that is specifically formulated for the conditions that we're working in. Those 4 options, and there are others that work well, or they are the good ways to do that. Those are professionally formulated, professionally manufactured, and adequately deliver a trace mineral supplement to our cows in a manner that provides them with the level of intake that is essential to get them the trace minerals that they need. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up. I certainly enjoyed being able to talk to you about trace mineral supplementation.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Curtis? From that, I'll start watching the chat if you had any questions. They're shy tonight, it looks like.
Yeah, there was one question that came in privately to me
Okay.
about
Perfect.
the difference between inorganic and organic trace minerals. So when we talk about an inorganic trace mineral, that's the form it would be added into feeds as its mined form. So trace minerals are actually mined throughout the world, like you would go to a potash mine or a coal mine, something along those lines. And for a product to be deemed chelated, it must have one bond to one amino acid, and it's not specific into the type of bond or the type of the amino acid. Then the follow-up question to that was, how can I tell if the mineral we're using is chelated? Now that's a question that you'll have to ask who you're purchasing that mineral from. As an industry standard, when purchasing a mineral that says breeder, lots of times we can usually assume that means it is 1/3 of the trace mineral content chelated. And if it's more or less, then that would have to be specified by the company you're purchasing it from.
Curtis, since this
Yep.
is a event, and we talked lots about commercial cattle and some purebreds in the video. Do you mind talking specifically, how does the minerals affect, them growing their steers, or, again, there's replacement heifers? How does it specifically affect their forage costs?
Right, and from the purpose of really affecting performance on any type of calf, whether it's purebred or utilizing hybrid vigor and crossbreeding, really it comes down to maximizing the genetics that we have purchased and are breeding into those cattle. Genetics have changed so much over the years, and we've put a lot more emphasis, especially using genetic markers and other technologies available within our industry to advance those decisions. And by supplying higher levels or a lot more bioavailable levels of trace minerals to calves, then we're not limiting in other factors, and then that's how we see that boost in performance. From a steer standpoint, performance can be, our first thought is true weight gain, but other performance measurements could be just overall health and thriftiness of those cattle. In developing females, either for raising to go into the feeder market or to keep as replacements, again, we have just physiological performance. Then we move into reproductive physiologically and how we can help to advance and get those animals on the right path to then be successful as replacement females.
So I don't know if you've seen that, Curtis, but Paul asked, the blueprint mineral, is it only one mineral fed all year, or does it change at different stages of the cow's production, i.e. calving, breeding, weaning?
Yeah, so that mineral comes in a program where we have a breeder option, a summer option, and a winter. It's a 3-phase program, but within that, in consultation with your master feeds dealer or rep, we can look at different things. I actually have some customers that use the winter for longer stretches than the breeder, just due to it being higher calcium in the winter. And I have some that use the summer mineral for a little bit more extended periods of time, because they are, a much later calving herd holding over into backgrounding and then marketing their calves on their own. I work with people that have 5 cows all the way up to, thousands of cows. So really there's lots of opportunity no matter what you're doing. A lot of it just comes down to the goals that you've written down. And if you're out there asking some questions, pulling in information to help you get to them.
Also to add to that, when I was watching Dr. Hertzman's presentation and started talking about concentrations in mineral and liver, I always kind of get a kick out of that when the scientists go on that, because really, most of us are never going to know what kind of mineral levels are in our cow's liver. But what I get out of that slide is that it changes throughout the year. And so they have different requirements throughout the year. So it's good to change our mineral programs to address that as they go through their different stages of production.
And also, just within growth curves itself too, Vicky, there are major differences from, let's say, transitioning into becoming a ruminant and going through to even the time of weaning to the time of breeding to then maturity. Things just change so much all along the way.
Curtis, there's another question in the chat, and it's what is the ideal way to feed mineral loose pellet tubs?
Again, that really goes back to what your family's operation is doing. Are you utilizing a TMR where a premix or a pellet can go into that with it easily mixed? Are you feeding free choice options? Or do you have mineral feeders? Are you bale grazing? I have lots of experience with all of them, and I recommend some to people, and I steer others away from some of those options, just in terms of what is the best fit for their program. And then Carson asked that question. That is what's good for your program. Any other questions? I sure hope everyone's got their calves tied and worked on. I imagine everyone can lead them around fully, ready to roll. May long weekends coming up, perfect opportunity to wash them outside in nice, beautiful weather. Even if it's raining, I'd wash them, because then hopefully that means it will rain more. Big plans brings on rain, so everyone keep making big plans. And just make sure you're doing everything you can at home. The 4-H program was really beneficial to myself and my sister, who's actually now works for 4-H Saskatchewan. So it's kind of neat that way how we're still tied back into it. And I am one of those crazy passionate show guys. So, along this line, if any members or families on the call here ever wish to reach out to me, please feel free. Emails, phone calls, texts, messages on Facebook, Snapchat me, Instagram. If you have questions, I truly would like to help you answer them. And if you have the drive to do something and get better at it, I'm sure as heck willing to help you do that.
Curtis, do you want to just put your email maybe in the chat?
Yeah, I can.
And then if any of the kids want it. Do you guys all want to turn your cameras on for a minute so I could snap a picture of this for
Everybody get out of their picture. We're not supposed to.
Everyone's welcome in the pictures. Come on.
Absolutely.
Now everybody wave to each other so it's not quite as awkward.
There's still a few more coming. Keep coming. Thanks, guys. Does anybody else have any other questions? It's so nice to see your faces, actually, rather than the black screen. Does anybody have any other questions?
And Curtis, so when we're talking about all those fancy show coats that we're trying to get on these calves, you know, again, is there minerals that help develop that, or do we got any secrets to, you know, feeding these calves to get those nice shiny coats?
3 things make great hair: elbow grease, and elbow grease. That's what makes good hair. Rinsing cattle, you know, so when we start talking about hair, I can go into very much stand on a soapbox and get into one here. So when we were growing up, getting our show cattle ready, and we'd been able to travel around and show a little bit, I took on as much knowledge about that as I could. And we were the family that put our steers and heifers in the barn under fans before it got too hot, before the sun was all the way up. We fed them in the barn, and then we let them out as it started to get darker, just to help manage their hair cycle. But that's maybe a little on the intense side. The number one way to have good hair is to keep it clean. My family, my sister and I, we never actually had a concrete wash rack. We built pallets and then a piece of plywood and used rubber matting on top where we washed, and it turned into a mud hole. And, you know, we made it a true poor man's concrete type of thing to wash our calves. And we didn't wash them every day until it started getting really hot and weren't quite as busy with school. But we blew them out quite a bit because clean hair breathes, and then that allows growth. The next part of the stimulation of hair is actual brushing and combing. That stimulation will bring more blood flow naturally to the hair follicle to help you keep one. And then, you know, the really champion of it really can come back down to just sheer genetics. You know, especially with club calf genetics, now that we raise quite a few more, those animals have been selected over a period of time to naturally hold their hair longer, while cattle in most breeding systems are naturally selected to be very hairy in the winter, but then to slick themselves off in the summer as to combat, you know, major weather changes. At our house, I actually have to shave off about a dozen cows every year before they go to grass because they grow too much hair and they just don't naturally shuck out. But that's part of the breeding decisions that we made at those times to make them that way.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll